Listen up, get ready, I'm not gonna take no more. There's a revolution, a revelation going on in my soul. Buckle up, get ready, we're not gonna sit back.
Hello, citizens of the world. Welcome back to Live from the Heartland. And our first guest today is a drummer. He's been called the hardest working drummer in Chicago by WXRT. It's the one and only Gerald Dowd. Hello to you, Gerald.
Hi, Michael. How are you?
I'm good. And how are you?
Doing just fine. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, we're really glad to have you. And I'm learning more and more about you. And I'm so happy to hear that you know about the band Twin Peaks, which came out of my basement with my son, Cadian.
That's right. We played on a stage together. Yeah.
You used to eat at the Heartland and you played there with some bands. Lynn Orman speaks really highly of you, and she encouraged us to get you on the show because you have an event coming up in a couple of days, Monday, July 15th at Space in Evanston. Tell us about what you got going that night, who's going to play with you, and what you're going to do.
Well, so that night is a double bill of songwriters, myself and my really, really dear friend, Richard Knight Jr., and we've known each other just about 30 years now, just under 30 years, and we've been playing music together ever since then, really, with little gaps in between. But yeah, we played in a band in the 90s called Samba Bamba, and we did that quite regularly. And ever since then, we've just continued to make music together in one way or another. And so this show will actually be the first time that he and I are both on stage together playing our own music. So he'll do a set with his band, for which I'll play drums, and then I'll move to guitar to play with my band.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
And, you guys have been playing together a long time. Samba Bamba, I like that name, but you don't call it that anymore.
Well, the band hasn't played in a while. Everybody just is very busy, and it's hard to get the group together again. But the band still, exists in theory, under that name. Yeah, it was a band that I joined maybe a year or two into its existence, and then continued to play with them for most of the rest of the 90s. Yeah. And it's kind of this irreverent Latin funk band that would do sort of cheeky arrangements of covers, sort of samba size covers. And so that was kind of and some originals too, but
you're talking samba and stuff, but I was listening to your new album, Father's Day, which is Americana kind of leaning country. I really liked it. And we did play one of the tunes coming into this segment, and we will play another one going out. But you've been a drummer for 40 years, and that's a long time to be hitting the skins. And I was going to ask you, I mean, that's a serious workout. Growing up, did you do other sports besides drumming?
I did. I was and still am a huge baseball nut. And so I played Little League, played baseball in just about into high school. And then I kind of had to make a choice. It was either do baseball, which I thought I might do for a while, or become a drummer. I just knew I couldn't do both. So I picked music.
I was reading that one of the things you did was drum for 14 hours one time. Do you want to share that experience with us?
That is true. I actually did it twice, foolishly. So when I put out my first solo record, my first full-length solo record in 2014, I'd gotten a grant from the city, from DCASE, to help fund it. And so I thought, well, I'll just I'll use my CD release show as a fundraiser to kind of give some money back to the city, and so we did a fundraiser for the Greater Chicago Food Depository.
Oh, nice.
And I really actually the keyboard player in Samba Bamba, my friend Scott Stevenson, who we've been making music together nonstop for about the same amount of time as Richard and I. He had a CD release show a few years prior to that, where he sort of corralled a bunch of bands that he plays with to play a long day, an all day event. And so I sort of co-opted his idea and did the same thing. And so we had, I think it was 16 bands and played for, about 14 hours, starting from noon till about 1 something in the morning over at Fitzgerald's.
Wow.
And raised a bunch of money for the charity. And then 5 years later, I did it again. And we raised even more money for another food bank in Chicago, the Pilsen Food Pantry, with a whole roster of different bands for the second time. So.
Well, these are great. Well, you mentioned Fitzgerald's, and I know that you have a monthly event going on out there. You want to tell us a little bit about that, please?
Sure. It's called the Song of the Month Club, and every month I have a different guest, and it's just the two of us, generally speaking. Sometimes there might be another musician, but generally I have a featured artist. And the way the show runs is I start the show with a couple of songs solo, and then my guest does some songs solo, and then we both do a full set together of each other's songs. And the only sort of criteria for the show is that each one of us has to bring in a brand new song for that night that we've written sort of specifically for that night.
Well, let's go back to your new album and talk a little bit about Father's Day, because there's a lot of nice tunes. I assume you wrote most of those tunes.
Yeah, I wrote all those songs. And a lot of them actually, maybe 4 or 5 of them actually sprung from this songwriter series, which I've had at Fitzgerald's now a little over 2 years we've been doing it. So yeah, over the last couple of years, I've written about 24 new songs, not all of which are. I don't love all my song children equally, but some of them are. But some of them made it onto the record, which was really nice to have those included. And yeah, so I last. Almost about 2 years ago now, I started going over to the house of Steve Dawson, who is a legendary Chicago musician and producer and writer. And we basically he and I kind of hunkered in his garage studio, Kernel Sound, and we laid down all the basic tracks, just he and I, because he plays a bunch of instruments and I play a few instruments. And so we mostly did all the skeleton of it together. And then we had a few people come in and do some guitar solos, sing some harmony. We had the wonderful Nora O'Connor singing on it. Robbie Gerso, who is a kind of a legendary guitar player. He plays with Jimmy Dale Gilmore and Joe Ely and the Flatlanders, and he played on some. And a lot of my good friends in Chicago who I've played with for the years kind of came in and added their talents to it. So it was it was a little bit longer process than I thought it would take to get it out, but we finally put it out last summer, and I'm very happy with it. Yeah, it was.
That's a nice album.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm
I was listening to it this morning. Well, Gerald, let me ask you, what brought you to Chicago? You were out of Boston, and you moved here in '91. What was it that attracted you to this great city on the Great Lake, Michigan?
Well, that's the city itself, really. I came out here with a band, my band from Boston. We came out here on tour in '87, I believe. And we played at Lounge Acts. And then we had a couple of nights off, the late great Lounge Acts. Then we had a couple of days off in Chicago, and we stayed down on the south side, right around Hyde Park. And we just kind of roamed around the city, and I immediately fell in love with it. To me, it had a very similar feeling on a much larger scale, but a similar feeling to Boston. It just felt very homey and very comfortable. And so then a few years later, when I started getting that itch to leave home, I thought, well, I'll either go to New York or Chicago. And it just seemed like Chicago spoke to me more as far as an attitude of a city or a personality of a city. And so that was it for me. And then I moved out here in '91 and really have been here ever since for the most part.
Well, we're glad to have you here in the center of the universe.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
This is a great place. You talked earlier about your love of baseball, and then you transitioned to music. And I'm just wondering, how did you get into playing the drums? What were the forces that propelled you into that seat behind the skins?
Well, our mother tried unsuccessfully to get us into first with piano lessons, and then violin lessons. I think it was that order, maybe the opposite order. But anyway, neither of those really spoke to me. And then I don't know. One day I thought, I've always really been focused on the drums in a song, and then I asked for a snare drum for Christmas one year, and I got it when I was 10, I think, which was 45 years ago, and that was it. And I started taking lessons, and then I would kind of through elementary school and middle school and high school, I would kind of go in and out of it as I discovered whatever pot or something would always kind of distract me a little bit, but then I'd always come back to it. And so then in high school is when I really sort of buckled down and thought, oh, maybe this is something I could do, I could see myself doing for the long haul.
Well, who are some of the influences when you became aware of other drummers who influenced you? I mean, I think of my own favorite drummers. Well, I don't know how much I really knew about Gene Krupa, but I also got to love Connor Brodner when he was playing with Twin Peaks. And I remember Buddy Miles, and there's a lot of drummers. Who are some of the important drummers in your development?
Well, right. Like we could talk about influential drummers all day, right, and never run out of topics. But
you know more of them than I would. But
well, there's a lot. When I was a kid, really the first music I remember hearing quite viscerally was the Beatles. So Ringo was and is still a huge favorite of mine, and really, I idolize him to death. He's the greatest. So then, from there, then I started to get into, got into Zeppelin and got into the Who. So Keith Moon and John Bonham, and then my dad was a big country music fan and also a jazz fan, and so my first jazz record was Mel Torme and Buddy Rich record, which I still have. It's a fantastic record. And that's when I went, oh, what is this? What's this kind of drumming? And then I started to really go down the a jazz path and study. I was still playing rock and roll, and when I would go down to the basement and play along to records, it was usually rock records. But then when I started taking lessons is when I started to kind of really work on more sort of jazz playing and just trying to expand beyond rock playing but yeah, so Buddy Rich was certainly a big influence on me. Other jazz drummers that I loved and still love and that really spoke to me when I was that age were Elvin Jones and Tony Williams and Joe Chambers, like all these. The list goes on and on as to how many beautiful drummers there are. And then in rock music, those I still feel that influence of Keith Moon or Stuart Copeland or Pete Thomas from the Attractions. I mean, that early stuff is still when I hear those songs, it's a very visceral reaction to that stuff.
Well, you've played with a lot of people. Do you want to give us a little memory of some of the people you played with who were really important to you or meant a lot to you or you liked the most?
Yeah. Well, I've been lucky enough in Chicago, a city with such, as a deeply rich songwriting tradition and culture. And so I've been really lucky to have worked with really some of the best songwriters of the last 20 years anywhere, not just in Chicago. I've been playing with Robbie Fulks since about 2000, and he's one of my all-time favorite songwriters. Nora O'Connor, Justin Roberts, who I still play in his band. I've been playing with him for about 17-ish years, I think. And he's an incredible songwriter. There's a band called Frisbee that I've been playing in for 20 plus years. And those two are two of the best writers I know. And really now when I moved out here, I moved to DePaul and I was mostly playing jazz because that's what I was studying at DePaul. And then when I left school after a year and started to just play, I just I fell in with the songwriters because I've always been a fan of good songwriting. And so, and then really that sort of kind of dictated my path, I think, ever since from about the mid 90s on. so so there's just, those are some of my favorite people, and I hate to list people because I know I'm gonna have to omit somebody, or I just keep talking and talking. But those are some of the people who I consider my really close friends, and they were highly influential, not just in the way I play drums, trying to play for their songs, but also really gave me sort of a masterclass in how to write. And so that's why I started to kind of want to try my hand at writing, because I felt like I've been just seeing these models of exemplars of great songwriting over the years. And so all those people and so many more have taught me just incalculable amount about musicianship and performance and songwriting. And so those are all people I know and are friends. And then there's I've been lucky enough to do these, to have some sort of crazy outliers. Like we were talking earlier, I've gotten to play with Eddie Vedder 2 or 3 times at some of these charitable events that we may talk about later. I got to play and record with Mavis Staples, which is that might be the top, but like that was my, boy, when I found out she was going to come in and work on sing a song on this record, for which I was kind of the house drummer down in Nashville. I went out, I bought a brand new shirt to meet her in. I brought a record for her to sign. I was fanboy all over the place. And she couldn't have been sweeter. That old saying, don't meet your heroes, but man, she exceeded my expectations of who she was.
Yeah, she's great.
Singer. She's great, right? Yeah, I'm sure you.
I first saw her at the University of Chicago Folk Festival in the early 60s. We're running out of time, Gerald Dowd. This was really a pleasure, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you a couple of days hence on Monday, July 15th at Space in Evanston. We had one of the owners of Space on recently, and it's a wonderful club. People can go to your website. Real quickly, tell us what your website is so people can hit it up.
Okay, it's the creatively titled GeraldDowd.com. That's it.
Right on. Well, everyone go check it out, because there's music on there. There's his new album, Father's Day, on there. A lot of information, and maybe I'll run into some of you at Space on July 15th, because I'm coming.
All right.
Thanks a lot, brother.